Michelle Licata. In 2004, Michelle Licata was a 16-year-old student in Palm Beach, Florida. As a teenager, she was looking for a way to buy Christmas presents for the holidays. A friend who already worked for Jeffrey Epstein recruited her, promising she could earn extra money by giving massages at his mansion. But things changed quickly. Once inside, Licata was caught in a grooming process. Epstein used his wealth and power to pressure her into sexual exploitation. It wasn't the job she was promised, and it wasn't a choice she truly had, which left her feeling uncomfortable and anxious. What made her different was she didn't stay quiet, but instead, she stepped up immediately. In late 2005, she became the first victim to give a detailed statement to the Palm Beach police. She described the inside of the mansion and Epstein's behavior so perfectly that police consider this as a serious matter, and it is more than just suspicion. They needed to get a search warrant. Later on, her testimony helped the police to finally be able to raid Epstein's home. However, the justice system let her down. In 2008, prosecutors signed a secret deal that let Epstein off with a very light sentence in a local jail. Michelle and the other victims were never even told about it, which they eventually found out through the news. For years, Michelle tried to move on, but the trauma remained. In 2019, a federal judge finally ruled that the government had violated her rights by keeping that 2008 deal a secret. After the release of the Epstein files, Michelle is now known as Jane Doe 2. Her testimony from 20 years ago is now used as evidence in House hearings, proving the FBI had enough info to stop Epstein back in 2005. She proves that one Chante Davies. In 2002, a 22-year-old massage therapy student in Los Angeles was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein through a connection linked to Ghislaine Maxwell. She was hired to provide massage services and assist during his travels. Over time, this work became repeated sexual abuse, which she says occurred during trips, stays at his residences, and on his private jet. Later that year, she traveled on Epstein's private plane for a humanitarian trip to Africa, which included high-profile guests such as former President Bill Clinton. While the plane refueled, a photograph captured her giving Clinton a shoulder massage. She later explained that he had a stiff neck from sleeping on the flight and described him as a perfect gentleman, emphasizing that the interaction itself was not abusive. The photo later drew public attention, illustrating the unusual mix of powerful people and the private world Epstein created. Over the next several years, she continued traveling and spending time in Epstein's circle, witnessing how he used his wealth and connections to maintain control over those around him. In 2025, she appeared at a press conference on Capitol Hill with other survivors, calling for the full release of the Epstein files and greater transparency. She explained the lasting effects of the abuse on her career, daily life, and personal well-being, and emphasized that those who support Epstein's actions should be held responsible for their role in allowing the abuse to continue. Today, she continues to speak publicly about her experiences and participates in advocacy efforts, supporting other survivors in accessing records and seeking justice. Anouska de Georgiou. In 1998, 16-year-old Anouska de Georgiou met Ghislaine Maxwell in Paris. De Georgiou, a British model and aspiring actress at the time, has said that Maxwell quickly befriended her and later introduced her to Jeffrey Epstein, describing him as a wealthy and influential financier who could help young people with careers in modeling and entertainment. At first, the meetings seemed harmless, focusing on her ambitions and opportunities, but over time, their interactions became inappropriate. She was asked to give Epstein massages and attend meetings that made her uncomfortable. The meetings involved grooming, with praise, promises, and manipulation that ignored boundaries. They became more controlling over time and turned into sexual abuse, which she was too young to fully understand at the time. The incidents kept happening occasionally into the early 2000s, while she was still a teenager, moving through high society circles in London and New York. She has described the lasting impact this had on her mental health, including emotional trauma, confusion, and struggles to trust people for many years afterwards. In her 20s, she got away from Maxwell and Epstein, but the impact on her mind and emotions lasted. In 2019, she spoke publicly at a federal court in New York during proceedings connected to Epstein's case, becoming one of the first British women to come forward. Since then, she has shared her story to raise awareness, support other survivors, and highlight the lasting effects of abuse. Johanna Sjoberg. In 2001, Johanna Sjoberg, 20 years old, was a college student in Palm Beach, Florida, when Ghislaine Maxwell recruited her to work as an assistant for Epstein. She initially assisted around his homes, but soon her role changed. She was instructed to give massages at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion and his Manhattan townhouse, often for cash, and at times the massages involved sexual contact with Maxwell present or supervising. She later testified in May 2016. During the civil case, Virginia Giuffre versus Ghislaine Maxwell, describing the unsettling environment she experienced, she recalled a visit to Epstein's Manhattan home with Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew. In a bizarre twist, Maxwell brought out a puppet of Prince Andrew from a BBC show and the group took a photo. During the photo, inappropriate touching happened, which Schoberg clearly remembered, even though Maxwell said it was a joke. She also described traveling on Epstein's private jet and hearing stories about his high-profile friends, including celebrities, business leaders, and worse, politicians, which she also sees how Epstein used his connections to impress and influence people. She stated she never personally met figures like Bill Clinton or Donald Trump, but she observed how Epstein carefully widened his relationships with powerful individuals. Her testimony explains how Epstein organized his network, the rules and expectations he imposed on the women working for him, and the structured environment of his homes, where access, schedules, and interactions were closely controlled, all within a setting of wealth and private luxury. Juliette Bryant. In 2002, Juliette Bryant, a 20-year-old student from Cape Town, South Africa, was approached one night by a woman who offered her a chance to advance her modeling career and meet influential people in the United States. Trusting these promises, she traveled to New York, unaware that this would mark the beginning of a traumatic ordeal. On the flight to Epstein's private island, she realized something was terribly wrong. Her passport was taken, leaving her trapped and isolated. Once on the island, Bryant was subjected to repeated sexual abuse and manipulation. The luxurious surroundings and presence of powerful individuals masked the reality of her situation, making it difficult to seek help or escape. She described her life as being controlled and dictated by others. She was moved between Epstein's properties for several years, trapped by invisible chains of fear, constant control, and psychological manipulation. Every aspect of her life was monitored, from who she interacted with to where she could go, leaving her with little sense of freedom. After roughly 3 years, she was finally able to return to South Africa, though Epstein's influence over her life and the memory of that control continued to affect her for many years. In the years that followed, Bryant came forward to share her story publicly, joining other survivors as well. By 2020, she received compensation through the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, and in 2023, she reached a separate settlement with JP Chase. Juliette Bryant's story shows how people can take advantage of ambition and why it is important to protect those who are vulnerable. Courtney Wild. In 2001, 14-year-old Courtney Wild lived in Palm Beach Country, Florida, when she was first recruited to Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. A friend told her that a wealthy man, sometimes described as a doctor, would pay teenagers $200 for massages. For someone her age, the money sounded like easy, harmless work, but there was no warning about what she would encounter inside the mansion. When she arrived, the house was impressive and intimidating, with high ceilings, marble staircases, and expensive artwork. Staff moved quietly in the background. Epstein reportedly greeted her calmly and asked about her life and family, creating an appearance of normal conversation. But what was presented as a simple massage quickly crossed boundaries, putting her in a vulnerable situation controlled by an older and powerful adult. Epstein allegedly ran a recruitment system where girls were encouraged to bring other girls and could earn extra money for each new person they introduced. Courtney has said she was pressured into recruiting others and estimates she introduced dozens of girls to the network. This system created a cycle that made the situation feel more normal and harder to question. Courtney was reportedly exploited multiple times and introduced to other men connected to Epstein, and receiving money afterward added confusion to an already difficult situation. In 2008, Epstein signed a secret plea agreement with federal prosecutors in Florida. He pleaded guilty to 2 lesser state prostitution charges and served 13 months with work release, while many of his victims, including Courtney, were not informed about the deal. Courtney later challenged this in court, arguing that victims' rights had been ignored. Her legal fight lasted over a decade. When Epstein was arrested again in 2019, the case returned to public attention. Even after his death later that year, Courtney continued speaking publicly about the case, highlighting the importance of accountability and protections for victims.